So thanks very much everyone for joining us today. We'd like to acknowledge in the traditional fashion here in Australia the Indigenous custodians of this land, the Jagera people and the Turrbal people, who are the traditional custodians of Meanjin, Brisbane. These are the lands on which we meet, work and learn today, and we pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. I am particularly grateful for the custodianship of this land. As some of you will know, Meanjin has been a big part of my working life, and so happy to see so many faces here in Brisbane that are a part of that career. And I was sitting in the State Library of Queensland yesterday, which is also, spoiler alert, but it's one of the ethnographic sites for my research when I was a postdoc here in Brisbane. And that is the research that went into the book, Work's Intimacy, that ended up being the book that got me a job working in tech. So there's lots of things that I feel very emotional about, because it's been a wonderful place for me to get to know so many smart people, but also get closer to the passion that I have for studying technology, which is what we're all here to talk about today. So before we begin, I wanted to situate today's discussion on repair in the context of a broader project that I'm leading at the moment for the ADM+S Centre. So for those of you online who may not have been to an ADM+S event before, the Centre of Excellence for Automated Decision Making and Society is a fantastic multi-year initiative that has been funded by the Australian federal government. It's an extraordinary achievement just to get one of these centres funded. And we have one of the leaders of the centre here today, Julian Thomas, distinguished Professor Julian Thomas. And I think we may be getting a special guest at lunchtime from the leadership team as well. So this centre is setting a very bold agenda for the social impacts of autonomous decision-making technologies, which sometimes you are hearing abbreviated as AI in lots of media commentary. And I've been on the advisory board for that centre for several years now, and it's been a great privilege to see so much of the fantastic work that's being done by a number of people here in the room and online. But something that has been on my mind, I suppose, as I've been listening to the agenda unfold, is that there is a big conversation that is not yet happening, and it's not just in this centre, it's in the broader commentariat around AI, which has been enjoying a fairly large hype cycle, and it's the environmental impacts of these technologies. So in my most recent role working at Intel Corporation, I was leading some of the sustainability initiatives underway at that company, and also working with other companies on their sustainability commitments. And some of the things that you hear about, things like net zero goals and carbon reduction, and really covering the whole gamut between product design changes that we'll hear a lot about today, all the way through to different ways of managing operations and planning facilities and things like that. But I was not quite satisfied with the amount of work we were getting done in that context. So I've had the great privilege to be able to join the ADM+S this year to do this specific project where we get to talk about these issues more openly and more plainly. And this event today is the first of a series of, I think, at least 4 we are going to do by the end of the year, where our aim is really to try and map much more of the physical and material impacts of artificial intelligence and automated decision-making technologies, because they're not just in the ether, they're not just software, they're also dependent on extremely difficult and complex webs of logistical and manufacturing effects that not only employ a lot of people in the world, but have a contribution that is not always acknowledged to environmental damage. So this is part of the project to start to introduce these conversations as really necessary right now, as so much of the positives and negatives are debated about the applications of technology. Can we also maintain a focus on what are the impacts on the physical location where these technologies emerge and then re-emerge? So the other specific focus of this series, as the people that are staying up late to hear us today will be well aware, is that we wanted to have these discussions in Asia Pacific time, because there is such an important role for countries in this region, not only in terms of using technologies, but manufacturing technologies, distributing them, assembling them, and ultimately dealing with them when they're discarded. So it's really fitting for us to be able to introduce this topic here in the Asia Pacific region, and in future I imagine we will be expanding this series in partnership with some of our North American friends, and hopefully having some conversations that are more friendly to that time zone. But we're being purposefully biased is my point in making that explicit today, because it does seem as though we often hear the future of technology and the agenda for technology coming from American voices. The practical proceedings today will be a series of talks in this morning's time slot for Australia and Asia Pacific. But we also have a number of people online who are likely to need to go to bed at some point. So in the afternoon, we'll probably be transitioning to a bit more of an intimate discussion. But please, for those of you online, feel free to stay as long as you're able. We will be breaking for lunch though, so I imagine that's going to be a natural way to consider your continued presence. We will be recording all of the event though, so it will be available to anyone who'd like to listen in later. Other things that you should be prepared for today, there's Wi-Fi available in a couple of forms if you're here in person. There is an edu-roam if you have a university affiliation. If you don't, there is a public Griffith Wi-Fi access point that will allow you to register with an email. So I can help with that if there are any issues. Toilets you may have seen are just here in front of the room. And we have the lovely Jen here who is filming some of the proceedings. Now, this is something that we are hoping will be contributing to some work of hers as part of the ADM+S, and also as an archive of the conversations we're having. If you're not comfortable being filmed, please let me or Jenny know, and we will make sure we avoid you. But I'm really grateful for you to be here, Jenny, and to help us mark this occasion. And it's probably the most important acknowledgement I have to make today is Professor Leanne Weitzman, who's here at the front, who has been partnering with me on this event. When I asked her if she'd like to catch up with me in Brisbane a few months ago, I got a little bit enthusiastic about the possibilities of us combining our agendas together, because Leanne's work on the right to repair and the legal implications of repair discourse has been pioneering here in Australia. She's just come back from running her annual summit on the repair scene, I suppose is the best way of putting it, which we're really lucky to be able to hear the debrief from in her remarks later today. But Leanne's future fellowship is also a really fantastic acknowledgement of the value and importance of this topic of repairing not just electronics, but what we will become very aware of today, the range of consumer and workplace technologies that are increasingly out of our hands in terms of how we can keep them going longer and have access to ways and means to maintain their durability. Leanne's been so generous in helping us get this wonderful venue, and also just in terms of the logistics of working with me internationally, it's been quite challenging, I'm sure. So thank you so much, Leanne. And I'm really looking forward to the conversations we can have across disciplines today with your expertise and all of you here from the ADM+S and beyond. Okay, so I'll keep some surprises for later today, just in terms of the next steps in the event series. But my other thank yous are to Matt, who's taking care of our registrations outside, and to Brett, who's doing a wonderful job up the back and will have the busiest job today, I think, managing all of our speakers who are joining us internationally. So thank you in advance, Brett, for your specialist input and many Zoom focuses, or I'm not even sure the language anymore of how we do these events, but very grateful. Okay, so today's topic, repair, is really inspired by some conversations I started with colleagues that we're about to meet.